Welcome everyone to Real Estate Money School. I'm Matt Johnson. I'm here with our host, Chris Naugle, and we're so excited today because we are ready to kick off the podcast, and we're excited that you're listening, and mostly because we're going to talk about how to be resourceful when you don't have the resources you need to do what you want to do. And we've got a couple of stories that we're going to talk about from Chris's background, so we're excited to share all of that, and we're going to talk a little bit about what to expect from the podcast if you're not already a listener. So first of all, Chris, officially welcome.
Hi, how are you? I'm very excited to be here.
All right. So Chris, let's talk a little bit about kind of being resourceful, and you've got a pretty phenomenal example. But before we jump into that, just tell people where you're at right now. What does your life look like?
So, life's crazy. We're very busy. We've got 7 companies we're running, all real estate related. We have Flip Out Academy, which is the education side. We've got a wholesale operation. We've got our fix and flip operation. Then we got our rental operations. And then the most important thing is Money School, where we teach people how money works in real estate. We hold over $8 million in real estate, help well over 100 students in climbing. And it's just a wild ride. I couldn't be more excited about where we're at. And I never could have looked back in my past and never thought that I'd be right here. And I feel like I'm just getting started.
I know. And we'll get to that in a second, because this is a crazy story you're going to share. But tell me a little bit about when you think about Money School and the people that you envision helping and why you want to help them. I know this ties a little bit into your background, but just tell me a little bit about who is the person that's going to get the most out of listening to the show, and why is the content going to affect them so much?
Great. So there's kind of 2 people that Money School helps. And this is the strange parallel. There's people with money that don't know what to do with their money. And then there's people that have a deal or are trying to get into real estate that just don't know where to go to get money. And everybody always thinks that if I don't have the money, I can't do this. I grew up that way. We actually have all grown up learning and being, told if you don't have the money, you can't do it, which that's just not the truth.
Yeah, that's amazing. And and we're going to focus a lot on we're going to interview some of the people that have the money and are looking for deals. And then we're going to focus on the people as well who have been through that stage where they've had the deal, didn't have access to the money, and go through the progression of how they found it and some of the obstacles that they overcame. So let's dive into kind of a story from your past of you being in that exact situation. So take me back, set the scene a little bit.
All right. So I got to take you back to my upbringing, because that's the most important part. So it's important that everybody knows I grew up in a very low income household, in a broken household. So my dad left at an early age. He had a drinking problem. And so it was just my mom raising me. And my mom literally she ran a daycare just so she could be there with me to, support us, and barely made enough just to keep a roof over our heads. But the one thing that my mom always did is she always taught me to dream big. No matter what, dream big. Don't let anyone tell you can't do something. And maybe she probably shouldn't have done that, because she created a monster in saying that. The story I like to always start when I was 16. I had a terrible job working at a restaurant where I was degraded every single day. I was made to feel like I couldn't do anything right. And I got the courage one day to get up the muster to say, I quit. And that day when I quit, I said to myself, I'm never going to work for anyone ever again. And I didn't. I went home and I told my mom about this crazy idea of starting a snowboard clothing line out of the basement. And she was like, great, do it. And my mom was good at sewing, so she ended up becoming the seamstress. But the money issues really didn't happen there. I took a $500 loan from my local community bank, and that's what got it started. Made shirts, sold them in high school. And the biggest hurdle was the second year of running this company. I was 17 years old. It was like a year, almost 17 turning 18. I had this crazy idea. I said, I love this. I'm traveling around. I'm selling my clothing, but I need my own place. I need a store. And there was this mall called the Lockport Mall that I wanted to open a store in. And I met some people, and that's exactly what we set out to do, is create Fat Man Board Shop. So it was Fat Clothing Company, and then I was the man, so Fat Man. So the only thing I needed to do this store was $70,000. And I was 17 years old, crazy snowboarder. I'm like, no big deal. 70 grand, I'll find it. So I went around and I did what most people do when they need money. You source out all the people you think have money. And you go out there, you pitch the opportunity, you pitch the idea. And I did this over and over again, starting with family members, moving on to close friends, and just kind of going down the line. And obviously a 17-year-old with this crazy idea, the answer was, no, you're crazy. No, no, no. And right down to the point where I actually, my father told me to go get a job at the factory he worked, which that's a whole nother topic.
Wow.
But the one thing I never really understood is how to be resourceful. I just knew go find the resources. So the resourceful part landed where I almost gave up on my dream. And then I had this one bank that said, kid, if you can find collateral to support this $70,000 loan, we'll give you a shot because we like your idea and we like your spunk. And I'm like, what is collateral? And they said, well, it's enough, something with value that will cover it. I said, well, I have baseball cards and I've got a 1986 Buick. Is that enough? Obviously, they said no. So I started going around, same thing, kind of trying to find somebody that would support that. And I landed with my mom because she was just really upset that nothing was working right. And she said, well, Chris, the house that I got in the divorce has about $70,000 in equity. I'd be willing to put it up for collateral. So there's a lot that spins off for that. And there's a lot more to it. I had to write business plans. I had to learn about preparation. I had to learn about, what you have to do to get money from a bank. And I also had to learn how to protect mom, because the one thing I couldn't do is lose mom's house. So that was kind of my first entry into being resourceful versus just thinking I needed the resources.
Okay. Yeah. There's a lot there. There's a couple things to pull out. Number one, you didn't even know enough. And the only way you found out about the concept of collateral is just by going out and doing it and being resourceful and starting to pitch people, right? It wasn't something you found by reading a book, or something you knew in advance to even pursue as an opportunity. So you had to go out there and even just start the process to even have that available to you as an option. And the second thing is, so we know kind of what the external obstacles, right? You're 17 years old, you need $70,000. You have no idea how to get it. To most people, that's an insurmountable obstacle. They won't even get started. But let's say you do get started. Then you start running up against kind of the internal stuff. Let's talk a little bit about just where most people would get stuck in that process, which is some of the hesitation, the fear of rejection and things like that. What did you experience when you're going through that, pitching people, getting no's, finding out you don't have the resources, you don't have the things you need, you don't have access to what you need? Tell me a little bit about what you experienced.
Absolutely. And it's very much the same as everybody faces when you have to do something that you've never done and you never even thought about doing. Fear, that internal fear of actually just going and talking to somebody about them giving you money, because we're always taught, don't talk to people about money. Don't ask them how much they make. Don't do this, so we're just brought up that way. So when I first started having to ask people for money, it was very difficult for me. And I kind of danced around it. I was sometimes set up the meeting with the intent to talk about money and talk about everything but money. And really, I did. And, I had to learn and really a couple of people just said, kid, get to the point. Stop beating around the bush. So that's when I kind of just started getting right to the point. So those internal things would have been that fear of actually just going out and doing it, that fear of thinking about calling that person to say, can I meet with you to talk about an opportunity? And I'm going to talk to you about you lending me money. And it never really went that way, but those are the things we build in our mind that's scary. Asking people for money is just downright scary, especially if you're not used to doing it. And then your mind starts playing other games on you and starts making you think, oh, they're never going to give you money, or why would they give you money, or this is a stupid idea. And that's all just your mind and your fear playing tricks on you. And that's why a lot of people don't get off the ground, is because they just don't get started. They don't take that leap. And I think that's the biggest mistake people make. And I think that's the thing that really upsets me the most. Why I wrote the book, why I want to do this podcast, is I want people to know that there's more money out there than anyone can ever imagine for their deals, for anything you need money for. And all you need to do is know how to go out there and get it and where that money is. That's the most important thing. Because I never would have thought that money existed in mom's house with the thing called a home equity line of credit. I was 17. Do you think I knew what that was? I had no idea. But if I did, that would have been the first place I started.
Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of, you go through this transformative experience as a teenager and explodes your worldview. You realize there's all kinds of things you don't know, but most of all, you realize that, hey, if I just move forward and plow through, I'll uncover opportunities that I didn't even know were a possibility that I can then chase down and pursue. So flash forward to 2008. Tell me a little bit about the next thing that happened that was kind of a direct result of that change you went through as a teenager.
Sure. I mean, a lot happened from that point in time to 2008, obviously, but in 2008 was a milestone. I had my stores going. I had 2 locations up for Fat Man. Everything was going really well, but my lease was coming due at my main location, and I had to either renew my lease, but he was going to jump my rent. But 2 doors down was a dilapidated paint store. And I don't know how I got this crazy idea, but I'm like, I'm going to buy that dilapidated paint store. I'm going to renovate it. I'm going to make it 3 rentable spaces. My tenants are going to pay my rent, and I'm going to have my dream store. Great. All I need is $360,000. I had nothing even close to that at that point. Yes, I had the businesses going, but remember, it was a lifestyle business. I was a pro snowboarder at the time. I was traveling. I made just enough money to basically get by. I had no extra. I didn't even live for money. So at that point, I went around to all the same people got no. And then I landed on this one guy who was a hard money lender, a broker. And he said, well, there's this guy, and I'm just going to kind of make up the guy's name. We're going to call him Knuckles. And Knuckles is a hard money lender, and he'd be willing to take on the deal under these conditions: 16% interest, 2 points up front, and don't screw up, kid. And I said, great, give me the 360 grand. He did. But what happened next is, well, and there's a lot of prep that I had to do for him, because at that point I had learned how to get money, but I hadn't learned how to work with an institutional lender like Knuckles. Okay. So they gave me the money, but then in 2008, we know what happened. The whole market collapsed. My retail stores dropped 30% overnight. My financial advisory practice that I was doing came to a screeching halt. I was working harder than I've ever worked, making no money. So I got to the point where I was like 2 months away from being bankrupt. And I don't mean broke, I mean bankrupt. I was already well into the broke stage. Mm-hmm. So the next things that happened was just sheer luck. I got a tenant, then I got a bank to take out Knuckles, because I think if I didn't pay Knuckles, he wouldn't have just taken the strip mall. I probably would have lost a couple fingers and who knows what else.
Oh man. Okay. That is a crazy story. All right. So you get essentially, you get Knuckles cashed out, you get him kind of off the deal, right? So you get into a relationship with a much better place, at least, to get money in that particular situation. So when you look back at that now, especially since this is, like another 10 years from now, what does that experience do for you, kind of knowing that that's in your back pocket, knowing you've been through that, knowing you can find it when you need it?
Well, after that point, actually, I had confidence. That was that one defining moment. And I was a confident person up to there. Snowboarding kind of, you have to be confident, you have to be fearless. But at that point, I had confidence that if I wanted to do more deals, I could find money. I had developed a small little bit of a process. I knew nothing at this point, but I knew enough to be very dangerous. And really what happened next is exactly that. I got very dangerous. From 2009 to 14, when the whole market was down, I was smart enough to know a guy named Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett always said, buy low, sell high. But then he said, don't lose money. I hadn't figured that part out. But I knew that if I went out there and I started buying real estate, I'd buy pennies on the dollar. I did that. And from 9 to 14, I bought up 36 dilapidated units, renovated them, but I had no idea how money worked. I didn't have the slightest clue. I just had the confidence and the know-how to be dangerous. So I went out there and everybody would think, holy crap, you're this young kid, you got 36 units, you're on the top of the world. I was so broke that I had to ask my girlfriend at the time, she's now my wife, I had to ask her to help me pay for the mortgage. I had to move one of my friends into a bedroom in my house to help pay the mortgage and the utilities. That's how bad things got. So although I had known, I figured out how to get the money, I didn't get the money the right way, and I didn't structure the money the right way. So there's a big difference about knowing kind of how to get money and being dangerous, but then knowing how to get money and use it and leverage it the proper way. That's the part I didn't understand. I, again, almost went bankrupt. I got lucky and I listed all my properties in 2014, sold them all off. And then I had a little windfall of cash and everything was going good. And that's what got me into flipping.
Nice. Yeah. And I think the lesson there for anybody that's listening, especially if you're in the camp of folks who are looking from the outside in at this world, you want to get into this world of investing. You're learning about the deal making part of it, wondering where the money's coming from, that you're going to go through some of that same progression, right? Everybody is going to have that period in their life where they're dangerous, and you maybe make some deals that in retrospect you could have structured a little bit better or differently, but that's all part of the process. And it's part of having, and Chris, that's part of why you're mentoring people now, is to help them avoid some of those mistakes, so they get the end benefit that you have, which is the freedom and the lifestyle and the legacy that you're going to leave for your family and the real estate, kind of empire that you're building. All good things, but get there faster and with fewer mistakes. Yeah, because I think everybody has to go through that progression. So in terms of people kind of taking that next step, that action, they're not, maybe they're not 17 and have a mom who has a home equity line on their house, but they're really wanting to learn kind of what their options are. What's the best way for them to kind of take the next step?
So there's a lot of different things. I mean, knowledge is everywhere. I mean, we live in a world where you can get information and everything, but knowledge is also dangerous because we can get so much information, but we never even know where to start. And we never know how to apply knowledge. I think that's the biggest problem, is the application of knowledge is what matters. And that's what they don't teach. Financial knowledge is about applying that knowledge in a systemized way to get results. And I think, obviously I wrote the book on kind of where all the money is, how to get it. But the best thing is I like to say, go on this podcast, join us on this podcast, learn how to do it, read the book, get mentorship, find people that have done what you want to do and learn how they did it. So the other thing too, and don't ever be afraid of failure. Failure is how I learned everything that I've learned. I failed more times than I'll ever be able to admit in the amount of time we have, but I learned more from failures than I did any successes, and that's why I'm here. But I definitely want to make sure that people get where they want to be, follow their dreams, and chase their journey without the mistakes and without as many failures as I did, because failures hurt. Failures, sometimes you never get back up from it, but like Rocky said, it's not how many times you can get hit, it's how many times you can get back up. I want to make sure you get hit less times and still maintain and get back up.
That's right. Love it, Chris. Well, we're super excited. We're going to have some awesome folks coming up on the podcast. You're also going to be sharing kind of stories from your background and interviewing some successful clients and people that are kind of implementing what we teach in Money School. But Chris, tell me a little bit about just the first few guests to kind of that people can keep their eyes and ears out for on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm extremely excited. So my first guest is going to be a good friend of mine, Greg Hurling, and I've learned so much from Greg Hurling. I like to call him the king of passive income living. He literally has mastered passive income and also mastered living the lifestyle that we all want to live, traveling and just nice things. And how he's done it is the most important thing. And I'm not going to give it away, but he started at a very, very humble beginning. And he has now climbed to levels that, most people would hope to get to, much later in life. And he's younger than I am. So to hear his story of how he did it, to hear his story of what he does today and how he has literally figured money out and how he's figured out how to use other people's money to basically create the lifestyle he has for not just himself, because that's one thing, sometimes that can be misconstrued as bad, but how he has done that by helping so many people, so many of his investors live the lifestyles that they never thought were possible, because everybody thinks, hey, stock market's the only thing you can do out there. And he literally has reinvented the whole way to do it. Yeah. So Greg Hurling's incredible.
I love it. And one of the things that really attracted me to kind of helping with the podcast is that you're going to dive into some of these guys that are really super far advanced. They get to a point where they are unrelatable to some of the folks that are just starting their journey. But what you're going to do, one of the things you're going to do is have them kind of go back into their background and share those initial experiences of what it was like to get started, some of the initial failures and successes they had, how it felt, how they overcame those obstacles to get those first few deals done. So the people that are looking down the road and saying, okay, I want that lifestyle, but I can't relate to that person who's already way off in the distance and super successful. We're going to bring that back to reality and show them how they got started, which I think these are some stories that they probably they don't get to share very often. You may not really find anywhere else. So I think that's one of the reasons I'm really excited.
I think that's the most important thing, is learning how people have struggled to get where they're at and their journey and the different faults that they've had and the different failures they've had. That's what you learn from. And that's why I read books. Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, all those guys. Don't just look at where they're at, because that's something we can't really grasp. Look at all the things they had to do to get there, the struggles they went through, and then it's much easier to find your path. And that's kind of all the speakers are going to do that. We're going to dive deep into their past, and they might not like it, but they're definitely going to tell that story.
That's right. And all the listening audience gets to benefit from it. So
Absolutely.
Chris, thanks so much. We're super excited. Everybody go check out the other episodes, especially Greg Hurling that we mentioned. We're also going to have some of the other top investors in the country on the show throughout the podcast over the next couple of years. So if you're listening to this after the fact, make sure to go check out those other episodes and get your copy of Money School. So Chris, thanks again so much. Really appreciate it.
All right. You're very welcome. Thank you.